Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. We're going to be learning the final mimer of 5744, which the Rebbe said exactly 40 years ago, the night before Rosh Hashanah. And the mimer does touch upon several of the mamorim that were learned during the year, and that we learned, some of them that we learned. And it also is similar in style to the type of mimer that the Rebbe would say on Rosh Hashanah. And the Rebbeim called it Binyan HaMalchus, a day descriptive of the building of the kingdom and the creation of the world, which is the theme of Rosh Hashanah. Let's begin. If you want to follow along, we have it here on the screen, but it's also in the Rabbi Menachem Sefer Mamorim Moyadim Rosh Hashanah Shabbos Shuvah. And so it's newly reworked, but it's also, of course, in the previous Sfarim. Here it's a little bit different order and a little bit easier. Maybe not easier, but set up differently, if you will. Tiku, Bachodesh, Shofar. This is one of the Dibra Maschil, one of the classic sentences that many of the Mamorim of the Rebbeim throughout the years begins with. It's from chapter 81 in Tehillim, and we also say it in the Song of the Day. We also, it of course is a reference to Rosh Hashanah. So, Tiku Bachodesh Shofar. In the Chodesh, in the month, you shall blow the shofar. Now, the obvious question, and this is what the Rabbeim expounded upon, is that it doesn't say the word Rosh Chodesh, it doesn't say the date in a usual way. It just says in the month. Chodesh means in a month. V'yadu adiyuk Rabbi Menachem Mendel Feller Bachodesh tam. V'lochin mefarash b'Likutei Torah, and therefore the Alter Rebbe explains Likutei Torah. V'nispar baruch ha'idei tzemach tzedek, and it's explained at length by the third Rebbe, the Tzemach Tzedek, she'erev Rosh Hashanah yom huladtei, his birthday, the Tzemach Tzedek's birthday is on erev Rosh Hashanah. So this the Rebbe was saying this Chassidus on the birthday of the Tzemach Tzedek, for whom of course the Rebbe was named. And the Rebbe was a direct descendant of the Tzemach Tzedek, 5th generation. So the Tzemach Tzedek explains, "Shebachodesh stam koyal klolos inyan hachidush." The word chodesh, which means month in Hebrew, comes from the same word as chodosh, which means new, brand new. Something which wasn't there previously, and now it is. That's what new means. So, the reason why a month is called new is because the moon is new every single month. So, the Tzemach Tzedek says more than that, and he says that it's not just referred to Rosh Hashanah as new, meaning the month, but the whole idea and topic of something that is new, that wasn't there previously. Shebachodesh tam koyal kol inyan hachidush zeu hapirush v'atoichen dechodesh v'hainu shelifnei shemischalek lepratim shel chadoshim pratim. So, before the idea of months can now be subdivided and categorized into each month individually. And more than that, before we can even talk about renewal or new things in general, there is the whole idea, the basic idea of something which is brand new, something which wasn't there previously. That is the whole idea of when something is novelé. It means that it's something which didn't exist previously, which is here now, which wasn't there, and now we have it. Is that a new car? It's new for me, right? Because you didn't have it. Now you have it. Or there's a new car because they just assembled it. It was parts earlier. Shenimshach. So now, loirek me'atzilus libiyah. So now, there's creation. It didn't only come down from the highest realm, the highest world, the world of Atzilus, to the subsequent three worlds, B'riya, Yetzirah, and Asiyah. K'mei achidush b'shar hachadoshim. Like it would be in every month and everything that we have, for that matter, anything that's new, but there is something which it has to come even from higher than that. It comes from the essence of God, the mere fact that God wanted to create. So the first thing following that comes after the essence and makeup of God is that God will create. The first thing, anything what it is, that is the chidush. That's new, because that wasn't there. Ad kama sheshayach loimer rishon ula achrei. The Rebbe, of course, qualifies this by saying, to the extent that you're able to say what is first and what is afterwards, what is following, b'kesher la'atzvus mahus, regarding the essence of God, because we know and that God is, of course, a continuous part of everything. But God, there's God in His essence, then there's God, the way God created the world, and therefore He shared what He wanted to do, and therefore His vision with this creation that He created, and included us, made us part of it. But there's the essence of God that's higher than, and therefore before creation. This is the navaleh, this is the new thing that happens on Rosh Hashanah. The kosher dominion ha-shofar, this is connected with shofar. So that's why it says, what Rosh Hashanah is referred to in Scripture many times. But it is specifically with shofar that it says, we have this idea of chodesh, that it's called the month, which is the word of something which is new. Tiku Bachodesh Shofar. Shemitzvah Yom B'Shofar. That's the special mitzvah of the day of Rosh Hashanah, the blowing of the sounding of the shofar. The shofar, whom we lashon tainug, like we said in the previous mimer, shofar. The word shofar has a connotation of pleasure, to make something nice. Kvi Shofar Tzemach Tzedek, and as the Tzemach Tzedek explains, she'afal pi she'isa b'Zohar. Even though we learned in the Zohar, the secret of the shofar, the message of the shofar is primarily in Bina. Bina is understanding, which is the formulation of dimension and definition of the quintessential point which preceded it, which is Chokhmah, right? And Bina and Chokhmah are always together, because the point, when you have an idea, is the flash, but that has to always be developed, and has to get dimensions, and it has to get defined and refined, etc., developed. So that's Bina. Pleasure is in Bina because you feel and understand what it is that you're enjoying. And there's a reason for this enjoyment, and there are how the enjoyment happens, etc. So the Kabbalah explains that the main place of pleasure would be in Bina. But nevertheless, the Rebbe says, according to Tzemach Tzedek, so the Zohar says that the secret of shofar is in Bina, and that would be the main place where pleasure is revealed. But then the Rebbe points out the three intellectual beginnings of everything, which are called the three intellectual parts of the head. Now, usually we refer to this as Chokhmah Bina Das, Chabad, but there are two ways to have these considered, the Gimel Russian, the intellectual part, before the emotional part of the midas, the attributes of kindness, severity, and the beauty of the combination of the two, and then the way they come down into and imbue the world through their other virtues, until we have Malchus, which is the female sphere, the seventh sphere, which we'll talk about later. But the three parts of the intellectual spheres we refer to as Chabad, because that connotates the result of the wisdom, the understanding, then the knowledge is the result of the two. Kechav is where they come from, the point that's called Keser Chochma Bina. Keser is the crown, and some describe it as like it's the goal, if you're goal-oriented or result-oriented. Now, if somebody were to tell you I'm goal-oriented or result-oriented, really they're saying something which is one and the same. But what are you're at one point talking about what it's going to be, and then what it could be and how it happened. So we focus on Chabad, and even when there's Chabad, there's still Keser, because Keser lines up with Das. They're really one thing. Just that before you get to Chochmah and Bina, there's going to be involvement of an idea and the understanding. It's Kachav, but the ultimate result of what the intellectual powers want is the result, and that's Das. Das when it becomes part of you. But you can only have it one way, and therefore Chassidus Chabad speaks about that's what the ultimate of creation is, that it's result in the world. God wanted to permeate the world with His presence through the performance of Torah and mitzvahs, and therefore it's Kachav. But nevertheless, Kabbalistically, it's referred to a lot, including in Chabad Chassidus, when you have to talk about Kachav, and here we're talking about the creation and the order that it happened from the highest levels. So here it's mentioned Kachav. Shoshetlas, Russian Kachav, Chshivi Kechad, they're considered all one thing. So how could you say that it's just in Bina? We know elsewhere in Chassidus it says that Bina and Chochmah, says this all over, is Trei in the Lemis Passion. They're like two friends that never separate. In other words, they always must be together. You can never have one without the other. You can never have understanding without the idea that's being understood. And you can never have an idea that's not developed into something. If not, it's nothing. Now, Das is then how the reality of that of the two that preceded it, and Keser is the idea that you're thinking and that there's going to be something. So Das and Keser line up. As a matter of fact, when we place them center, right, and left, so the Chochmah is on the right, Bina is on the left, and in the center, on the top, you have Keser, and on the bottom you have Das. Then you have again right and left, Chesed right and Gvura left, and in the middle Tiferes. Then it goes again on the right Netzach, on the left Hoid, then again in the middle Yesoid, and Malchus is also considered in the center. So the Rebbe says that even though the revelation is in the Bina part, but they're really all part of one thing. Bina draws it down from the other aspects of Keser and Chochmah. Therefore, Bina is where it's revealed, because that's where it has dimension. So that's where the pleasure is felt there. A little long-winded here, but these are some concepts that could be basic, but they're also complex. And the Chassidus mentioned in a lot of places, so even in the interest of time, well, God willing, maybe divide this mimer into two pieces, because we have a lot of ideas to cover. וגם כאן, כמו בעניין החידוש, הכוונה היא לתענוג סתם, שלמעלה מכל עניין תענוג. Here, when it's talking about the idea of something new, it's talking about the simplest, purest idea of pleasure, which is higher than pleasures that have details and how nitty-gritty and things like that. And therefore it's higher than even this whole idea. It's just the innate pleasure of satisfaction of something. The way it's in the essence and the makeup of what pleasure is. That is the source of all pleasure. It's yet undefined. It's even higher than having or being a source, because will and pleasure, Ratzon and Tainug, are also together. Do you want something because you have pleasure from it, or do you have pleasure because your will was fulfilled? And this is a discussion elsewhere in Chassidus. But they're both higher than any details. Now, these bring about that there should be something. There should be creation. There should be instructions. There should be how it's done. So it's higher than even having a source. Because they're not relative to each other. This is one's essence, how it is, and what they're going to feel. And the rest is just details about how to come about that. And like it's explained at length in the Siddur with Chassidus, that was compiled by the Mittler Rebbe, Rabbi Dov Ber, the son of the Alter Rebbe, the second Rebbe, in the Maimer that begins to understand the idea of sounding of the shofar according to the intent and the kavanah of the holy Baal Shem Tov, which parenthetically, of course, this is a reference to the Maimer, which the Rebbe says that those who blow shofar should learn this Maimer in the morning of Rosh Hashanah before they blow shofar. And the Rebbe says, and by the way, the Maimer is available in English. I believe it's about a 75-page book. So it's good to study it a little before, to be familiar. It's a long Maimer. It's also printed today in the Machzorim. The whole goal of Rosh Hashanah is to draw down from that essence of God, that highest spot, that spot that's higher than creation, that spot that doesn't have details yet, the essence and the makeup of God Himself. Because we have to draw down, we have to bring about a new will to connect, the will of God that God should give us and connect and create. And therefore God will have a new, automatically if there's a new will, there's new pleasure. But this pleasure brings about this will. They go hand in hand. The general idea of all the wills and all the pleasures of God. And therefore we have to draw down and tap it to a spot which is higher than anything where there's details and things where things are divided up. And the Tzemach Tzedek continues to explain which it says generally in the Likutei Torah of the Alter Rebbe, after you have this idea that there's something new, there's going to be creation, and then therefore things can now happen turn into other things. In the case of months, you have the first month, and then the months that can be divided into other months. Shezeu mashakosov Bachodesh Hashvi goimer. Shekan leinemer chodesh stam. In the Torah itself, this Tiku Bachodesh Shofar is in Tilim, but in the Torah itself, it says when it's talking about the holidays, the festivals, it says on the 7th month. It doesn't say then just Bachodesh and you have to know when it is, the month. Here it says the 7th month. This is already. This is the way the way the months are already after we had the whole idea of something could be new. So we have the way it's already subdivided, and then, like the Rebbe says over here, that once you have the idea of the fact that you have months, then we can have them in an orderly fashion, and then, therefore, here in the Torah it says the 7th month, it's already included in the ordinal numbers, right? There's the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th. This is the 7th month. Now, we'll talk about the significance soon of the 7th month. But here, it's already in process. It's called the 7th month. And more than that, the Rebbe points out and says that from Rosh Chodesh, every Rosh Chodesh of every single month, then the rest of the month gets its energy and flow from the Rosh Chodesh. It gets drawn down into the rest of the month. Therefore, once God is telling us about Rosh Hashanah, he says in the 7th month, on the first day of the month. There's the idea of the Rosh Chodesh, and then there's which day it is. And then that verse also enumerates the animals of the offering of the day, and the other things that are brought, the wine, etc. This day of Rosh Hashanah has a different offering than the rest of the days. Even from the other festivals of the day, of the month of Tishrei, of this month. Now the Rebbe says, and you can take it to the bank, as Rabbi Menachem says, that from the idea of the fact that there's something new, and therefore it's called Chodesh, and therefore it's this month, and it's in a general sense, this whole idea comes through from the 7th month, which is a little bit tough to understand, because you would think that has to happen in the 1st month. Now you can really take it to the bank. This is already like Fort Knox, as Rabbi Menachem would say. Al kol ponim harei ze hakesher im hayadua shebirchas kol chodshei hashana b'keach habrocha shemvorach HaKadosh Baruch Hu reish chedesh tishrei Rosh Hashanah. This is also connected to the idea that this past Shabbos is still Shabbos of Baruch. We don't call it Shabbos of Baruch because we don't bless the month, but the month of Tishrei is blessed by God, and God, when God blesses the month, He gives us subsequently the power to bless all the other 11 months. And we're not going to get into the whole depth of why it's like that, why we wouldn't bench the Chodesh of Rosh Hashanah, but just suffice it to say that Rosh Chodesh is not second fiddle, but it takes a more laid-back approach because it's the head of the whole year, and it's so special. Even in the prayer, we only say Milvad Oiles HaChodesh. We do mention the offering, but that's it, because we don't focus on it. But when is Rosh Hashanah? On the first day of the year, which is the first day of the month, the first Rosh Chodesh, and the head of the whole year. So, the Rebbe says that the whole idea that there can be something new starts in the 7th month. It's a little bit of hit the ground running. And the Rebbe is going to talk about this a little bit later on, because when there's a circle, you could start at any point. And he'll also mention that, I don't want to jump the gun here, but the idea of Shabbos, we know Kabbalistically that Shabbos is the culmination of the previous week, and it also blesses the coming week. The first Shabbos was the culmination of the creation. But what about the Shabbos that blessed the creation? More to come. And from the months of the year, it goes into the days of the year, through the Rosh Chodesh. So the power comes from the Rosh Chodesh, and therefore goes into the first day of the month, into the rest of the days of every single month. And this is directly connected to the children of Israel. And as a preface, the idea of Rosh Hashanah in general is the idea of the creation of the children of Israel. That's why the Rosh Hashanah was made on the 6th day of creation, the day that mankind and human beings were created, not on the first day when everything was created, which would mean, by the way, very high realms, very high worlds. And like we spoke about this in the previous Maimer too, that the whole idea of creation and the highest realms were created on the 25th of Elul. But when is Rosh Hashanah? The day that Adam, the first person, was created. Shabbai Klulim Kol Neshamas. In him is included all souls. Bedugmas Nishmas Yankiv Shenikra B'Shem Yisrael Sava, like the soul of Jacob, which says also Kabbalistically Jacob was directly connected to Adam. He looked like him, etc. Even though we're all descendants, but Jacob was an encapsulated him, and therefore all souls are included in Jacob, and therefore he's called Yisrael Sava, Israel the grandfather, or Israel the special. Like it's explained in the holy letter, in the holy Tanya, the holy book of Tanya. Shezehu hareish de rasheichem shel kol bnei Yisrael atzoif kol hadoros. This is the head of the heads of all of Israel for all generations. In him there was the inner part of Adam, the first one, and the purpose of his creation. And this is the purpose of the whole creation, was for mankind and for Yisrael, shehi b'shvil Yisrael atam kriyim Adam, for the nation of Israel to lead the way, to manipulate the whole creation and turn it into a godly place. Shenikroim Reishis. Yisrael is called Reishis, the head, and Torah is called Reishis, right? But first is Yisrael, and for Yisrael, then the instructions are in the Torah, right? We learned this a few weeks ago too. In the Torah it says, speak to Bnei Yisrael. That means Yisrael was already there. And the Torah, which was the blueprint of creation, spoke of how and what, details of what Yisrael should do, which means Yisrael is rooted higher than that. Now the Rebbe is going to explain further. God thought about Yisrael before anything. Even before thinking about Torah. When he created man, what did he do? He animated. He turned him into a living creature, by blowing into his nostrils, blowing into him the breath of life, the soul of life. The Zohar says, as it's quoted in the Tanya, the reason why we always say that the Zohar, the way Tanya quotes it, is because we don't see this in our editions of the Zohar. But the Tanya quotes the Zohar saying that whoever blows has to blow from their innards. When you blow out hard, so you get from your essence. That meaning that God gave into the humanity, into the Yisrael, when he blew this neshama from his essence. Pirish mitechi yusei mipnimi yusei, from his innermost, from his inside. To the extent that a son is the essence of the father. Therefore, the way the souls of Israel are in the essence of God, higher than creation, before God decided to create, before he made anything. This is the brain matter, so to speak, the part of the essence of God, that we're already there. And now, in creation, we get put out and developed, etc., etc. As the Maggid of Mezrich explains at length, in the beginning of both of his famous works, that would be called Maggid Or Yaakov and Aratorah. What is the connection between the son and the father? The essence of the son is within the father before the son ever is actually ever created, right? How do they say it? I remember when you were the apple of your father's eye. No, is that what it is? I don't know if it's the apple of the eye. Anyway, yeah. So, so quite just in the most physical way, that the offspring are within the parents before the offspring exists. Very simple. So, האב את כלים שנס מציע של בן בפעל ולאחר שישנה מציע של נשמי ישראל כפי שהיא בעצמוס ומהוס, and after there is this idea that they are in the essence of God, הנה משום נמשך מציע של בן לכל פרטיו. From there it comes down into all of the details of what the children of Israel are, just like a child as the offspring of their parents. Gimel. And this is how it is in our service to God, and to preface this. By way of introduction, the whole idea of what a person has to do to serve God, that came about, that was the novelé of the first Rosh Hashanah. On the sixth day of the creation, even though before the sixth day, God was already the ruler, God was the king. God made heaven and earth, right? And the sun and the moon and the stars, and the trees and the grass, the waters, etc., etc., the animals. And especially the first day when everything was made, as Rashi says, all the matter was already there. It just started getting organized the other days. On the first day, we don't call it in the ordinal fashion first, but it says Yom Echad, one day, because God was the only thing, the only existence was everything with God. He was Yochad and Meyuchad. So, God was the only thing there, right? Everything was not yet organized. Specifically on the day that God created Adam, the first being, that he was somebody who had choice, freedom of choice. And this is what the human being has, and that's why they were given the great responsibility and privilege of bringing about the purpose of creation to the world, because we have choice. You may say, well, other creatures have choice. We don't have choice like a person with an intellectual ideas. There's a lot of instincts. But real choice is exclusive to the human being. And through serving God, he accomplished the idea that they accepted upon themselves the sovereignty of God. And they did it by their own good, free will. And with that, you're able to affect and accomplish the true idea of sovereignty and of kingdom and of dominion. And for this, we have to draw down from that level of pleasure what God really wants, the way it is in its source, which is even higher, and the way it is even higher than the source of all pleasure. In other words, in the essence of God himself. Like we mentioned earlier from that mimer of understanding the idea of blowing shofar according to the Kavanah of the Baal Shem Tov. And remember, we mentioned it last time too, that the idea there it brings out that even the sound of the shofar is without many notes. It's just a plain sound, because that connotates the most pristine, simple form of something. So this also accomplishes the idea and affects the idea, the advantage of when we're able to show something that we actually have it, that it's already here, and it's not just a description, but it's something that we have. So that's the idea of zeh. Zeh, this is it. So we affect the idea of zeh, and that's why we say zeh hayom tchilas masecha. This is the day that your whole world started to work. The day that Adam started to work with it. Not just the day that you had everything else. What we have in relation to koi means so it is. That's a description. And therefore, it speaks about the prophecy. Also, Moses spoke about zeh, because he actually was able to feel it and show it to the other prophets. All said, Koyam Hashem, so said God. Now here, Koi is also a reference to the 25th of Elul. 25 is Chaf Hey, the same letters that make up the word Koi. Chaf Hey Be'elul, Shekoi Pirushe She'ein Zeh Atros Hadover. When you say Koi, it's not the essence of the thing. King Dugmos El Muvad, it's an example. So it is, a description. Ach Kedei Sheyihi Emar Betz Boi V'Oimer. Al Yesh Ho'amiti. But in order for us to say, to point with a finger and say and speak about the essence of the true essence of the existence of that would be God, Zeh, to say this is it, for that you need the physical creation, not just all the supernal realms, but the ultimate part of creation. This is the finger of the Israelite person, a Yiddish finger that ever says, a Jewish finger that will be able to perform mitzvahs and shemara v'emer hine lekeinu zeh. He could show, and like it says in the verse, here is our God. Zeh havaya, this is God. Beis pamim zeh, we say twice, become mekemus, like it's explained. Shebe'inin zeh gufu pnimi yeshabai. That when you say this is it, we mean it in the deepest sense possible. Right? Hashem brings about the greatest happiness when we are involved and when He connects with us with His salvation. So it says, Zeh. So, what is Rosh Hashanah about? What is the main theme? That God says, make me the king over you, coronate me over you. Like the Medrash says, accept upon yourselves my kingship, my dominion, my sovereignty, and then I'll be able to decree decrees for you, give you laws, rules. That's the idea of Torah and the mitzvahs. That first and foremost, and now the Rebbe says even higher than first and higher than the head. In other words, to start, the first thing you have to accept upon yourself my dominion. It's the whole general idea that God is it. That's the essence and innermost of what a king is and what kingdom is. And this idea is part and parcel with the essence and inner part of each and every one of Israel. Take out the yellow highlighters. And then it comes down to the nitty-gritty and the details of the Torah and the mitzvahs. That's the idea of I will decree decrees upon you. Therefore, it says that when the Talmud says that God says, make me the king over you, but how to do it? Through the shofar. The idea of the kingdom and the rulership and sovereignty of God that comes forth on Rosh Hashanah, that happens through the shofar. Because, like we said, shofar is connected to pleasure. That's the essence of a person. A person wants to be satisfied and have satisfaction. But now the pleasure here is something which affects, which makes something happen. So that's the idea of the shofar that's blown in the city, and like it says, and the prophet says, Amos says, will the shofar be sounded in the city and the people will not tremble? When somebody gets frightened, suddenly they turn white. It means that the blood goes away from their face. In other words, we're affected by this. So the shofar has this idea of it's fear, it's awesome, but this is also the pleasure of all of this together, all encompassed and all encapsulated in our connection to God. This comes down to the rest of the details of serving God on Rosh Hashanah itself. There are many details and details of details. And the way it is on Rosh Hashanah, from the mere fact that the name of the holiday is called the head of the year, that stresses and alludes to the fact that there's a year that follows it. So it's connected to the rest of the year. This is drawn into all of the months and days of the year, ad achar Rishon, until the end of the year. U'be'efen kozeh, we'll finish Ois Gimel, and then we'll start the next session with Ois Dalet. So, u'be'efen kozeh, he gam avodas ha'adam b'chol yom v'yom. The Rebbe points out that this is the way we serve God every single day. I want to just stop here for a small, quick story. And that is that there was a boy whose parents had a grocery store, and he used to deliver groceries to the home of the Rebbe's mother, whose yahrzeit, her 60th yahrzeit, is going to be next week, exactly a week from tonight, on the 6th of Tishrei next week. It's going to be her 60th yahrzeit. So he, as a boy, he used to deliver the groceries, and whatever it was she asked, he got the conversation. By the way, this story is told by the fellow himself on one of the series of GEM, which have stories of the Rebbe, Jewish Educational Media. So, to make a longer story short, he asked the Rebbitzin, what is the Rebbe's favorite prayer? So she actually told him, I don't know. But hopefully by the time you bring the groceries next week, I'll try to find out. I'll ask him. And he came the next week, and he said, what's the Rebbe's favorite prayer? And the Rebbitzin said, Moide Ani. Moide Ani is what we say right upon awakening when we get up. The Rebbe's going to talk about it here. I just want to point out two other things. The Rebbe expounds on Moide Ani. There's a very famous sikha called Kuntas and Yonash Teres Chassidic. It was given out as its own work, and they wanted it to be an introduction to the encyclopedia of Chassidic called Sefer HaRochim Chabad. Nevertheless, the Rebbe didn't allow it to be an introduction, but he let it be published as a supplement to it, and he edited it, worked on it, where he explains how Chassidic is the pinnacle of the Torah, and that Torah has four parts: Pshat, Remesh, Drush, Sod, the simplest way, and the way it's expounded upon, and what it's alluded to it, and the secret parts of the Torah. And Chassidus adds to each and every one of them, and it has its own. So, and the Rebbe explains, what did he choose as the example? He explained Moide Ani as in all four ways, and according to Chassidus. So here, just it's in this mimer too, but here the Rebbe points out, one of the things is that Moide Ani is reminiscent of the whole creation. Because at the beginning, creation is something new, and then something which now you can build upon. And every single day you have a brand new day. So it has to mirror and be like the whole creation, and therefore like a Rosh Hashanah. Therefore you have like a Rosh Hashanah part of your day. So let's look inside. This is how it is every single day. Excuse me, the beginning of serving God, even before you before you study any Torah, and before you do any mitzvahs, take of Kishnei Mishnah, so immediately upon arising from one's slumber and sleep, when you start to serve God right then. That moment, your soul is back, united with your body as a person who's aware, who's awake. You can serve your Creator. What is the first thing? Moida ani. Moida ani lefanecha melech. Moida means that you submit, you thank, you recognize before Moida ani, I. But now the Rebbe explains how the Moida goes even before the ani. That the submission is before even who's submitting. There's the goal. Before you, the king, Shazeo Klos, Inyan Hamachos. This is the idea of dominion, of kingship. Before you, O God. Then throughout the day you have the various things you're going to come across during the day, materially and spiritually, and generally speaking, in its details, and the details of the details. And this is how it goes into everything in creation, as they are in their ultimate. The whole world is a very complex place. It's divided up into details and details of details. details, and in a way that like it's described in Psalms, how great is the world that you made. How wondrous, and then how what a great. There's a multitude of things that you made. How much you have made here. So in quality and quantity and greatness. To the extent that all of these things and serving God in a particular sense, when we do this, then we come to the ultimate goal of the end of days, that the true full redemption will come. When Mashiach comes, then we'll be able to have the revelation of the essence of God. This is all part of the process. In addition to the fact that then we'll know that the only thing that there is, the ultimate and the essence of what there is the name of God alone, nothing else. And that's above and supernal and supreme over the whole world. I just want to point out here, just very parenthetically, that when the Rebbe said this Maimer 40 years ago, this was a part of the Rebbe's own kapitel, Tillim, the Rebbe's own chapter. This comes from chapter 83 in Tillim, which many people are saying today every day, because it speaks about the success of Eretz Yisrael. They should have success in all of their things and further success, and build on the successes that we've had recently and that we're in the midst of, etc. But that was then the Rebbe's kapitel, and the Rebbe didn't always mention a pasuk from his kapitel, but here's a special mimer on Rosh Hashanah, like the Rabbeim. They were very involved in the idea of God's bringing God's malchus onto this earth. So the Rebbe, I'm just pointing out the fact here that the Rebbe quotes from his kapitel, even though there are many places, I guess, that the Rebbe, of course, could have chosen to say this idea, and then he goes to when Mashiach comes, it won't only be like that, but we'll actually be able to see it in our physical eyes, like we say when we take out the Torah and Shabbos and Yontif, like it says in Isaiah chapter 40, and like it says in Chassidic, it'll be so good that you won't even need the eyes. The pasuk there says, "V'ro kol basar yachdav kipi havaya diber." All flesh will see together that it's the mouth of God that's speaking. So the Chassidic, in a few places, it says that it doesn't say the eyes of flesh and blood. It just says flesh will see it. So Chassidic explains that you'll be able to perceive it everywhere, everything. It won't just be a faculty that's limited to your vision of eyes. You don't need your physical eyes. Your flesh will be able to see the strength, of the one who affects it and what is affected, the one who does it and what gets done. The fact that the Creator is here creating the creation continuously, and you'll feel that in your own flesh. In our own flesh. And then we'll, especially since we prepare ourselves in studying the ways this is, in the way, meaning learning Chassidus and seeing how God is and how God does do anything, even in these times before Mashiach comes, that we'll be able to feel it. That everything happens by His word. This is, of course, the famous blessing. Even when you take a cup of water, you make this blessing. That's a recognition that God is in everything. You have to be cognizant and aware of this. And it begins with the beginning of serving God every single day by saying, I thank you before you, the King. And that's the way every year starts. That God tells us, make me the king over you. Through what? In this inner sound. From innermost, it's the innermost of the innermost, like it says in Likutei Torah. We'll continue with Ois Dalid, Be'ezras Hashem, with the help of the Almighty.